We are lucky to have with us Timo Weidner, and Timo is a registered engineer for fire protection registered by the Chamber of Engineers in the state of Hesse, Germany. And he's also a principal engineer and fire protection expert for KREBS+KIEFER Engineering based in Stuttgart. Timo received his diplomat engineer education at the University of Applied Sciences in Darmstadt, Germany, and he is based there in Darmstadt today. He specializes in force protection code alignment and is expert in both German design codes as well as the U.S. Unified Facilities criteria, which of course is the criteria that applies to all the military services in the U.S. Department of Defense, as well as the NFPA, the ICC, and many other codes, which were gained from his experience on project sites throughout Germany, and including work that supported the Corps of Engineers work there in Germany. Timo also lectures at the Hochschule Mainz, which is the University of Applied Sciences there, as well as many other conferences and sessions, just like we're lucky to have him here for today. As I said, fire protection is a hot topic with USACE, with USER, and with USAFE. So we've asked him to cover this important topic. He's got a great program lined up. And with that, I'm really excited to introduce Timo. Over to you, Timo.
Very much, Margaret, for the warm words and for the introduction. I'm really happy to join you all here to speak about fire protection, code alignment. I know these are very tough topics, and they're always discussed very hard. So I try to put together a program for today that tells you a little bit about both the US point of view and the German point of view. When I learned last week from Cherise, who's going to attend the meeting today, I changed the program in the middle just to make sure I'll meet your intent and hope to hit some of your interests in this topic. So I'd like to encourage you, if you have questions in the seminar in between to a particular item, just please raise your hand and I'll try to put you in. So chime in. It's a discussion, and I think we have quite some time at the end of the program to discuss your questions or your remarks. So let's see. Now to the presentation. Now you should be able to see my screen. Seminar. I've seen that there. Excuse me?
We can see it. Yep.
Yeah, excellent. I've seen so many familiar names in the list attending this meeting, both from the States as from Germany too. So I'm really honored to have you all here and to be able to speak to you. So let me welcome you to the topic fire protection engineering for US facility in Germany, integrating UFC and German fire protection codes on this, well, a little bit cold and wet November day, but let me assure you, we're going to turn to very hot and dry topics to keep you warm and safe there. So let's see, what do we got? That's apparently me. For those of all who who don't know me, I'm in the field of fire protection, working with the US side for a bit more than 10 years. Started in smaller projects, happened to be at the 7th Army Command and Control Center, the Charlie Center at Wiesbaden Army Airfield, and quite some other projects through all of Germany. And yeah, I think that's enough for me. We're here for fire codes, not to learn about Timo Weidner. So what we're looking at. First of all, please keep in mind that I'm not an English native speaker. So if you find a word or sentence a little bit awkward or something like that, please don't judge me too hard. I did my really best to put this together for you. And so now let's come all together to one page. And being on one page means we have to start with the really dry stuff. I have to start with some definitions and words about responsibilities in the project. Who is going to approve what? And I'd like to talk first a little bit about the processes in UFC design approaches and ABG design approach in Germany. So let's first have a look at the US. We see there's the map of the US with all the states. And if you're working on a civil project in one of the US states, you'll have to incorporate the IBC 2018 edition building code as base for your design. And then you have fire codes. For example, here, if you're I'm looking at Maryland here, you have to incorporate the Maryland fire codes. You have referenced their NFPA codes and some ordinances. So it's you have a frame that is built out of the IBC, and it is brought down to some state codes that are used in, for example, Maryland only. First, when I put together this this presentation, I had all the beautiful same colors in blue and red all over the map, but having this US map in red and blue, I changed that. I didn't want to get into some discussions with you. It was too political, so sorry for all the green, but green's neutral today, so we'll follow this. So that's what we do to civil projects. And if you're working on US military projects, you'll have a slightly different way. On top, you have the UFCs that direct you which codes to use. So if you're working on the Walter Reed Hospital at Maryland, for example, you'll have the UFC govern you to use IBC 2015 and referenced NFPA codes. You will not use any state codes. You will only follow UFC and the referenced codes in there. That's the military way. And now we'd like to speak about the military way and the parallels in Germany. So in Germany, you see, we apparently have also the federal states, although the federal states are much smaller than the US states, of course. For Germany, we have also a federal master building code that is comparable with IBC, for example. But each federal state, each of the 16 federal states, we have to break down and amend these building codes because building law in Germany is state law. So every state is responsible for its own state law. And it's not only the building code that is special for every state in Germany. It's also all the ordinances, all the fire codes and the codes for special occupancies and so on. So you see, this is quite similar to how the design in the US for civil projects is. And if you're now working on a US military project in Germany, this is quite different. Above, on top of the over the UFC, there's the NATO Status of Forces Agreement, which is a contract between all NATO partners who have forces of NATO partners stationed on their premises in their countries. And this contract is brought down in Germany to the law ABG 75. It's the national implementation that was brought up in 1975. That's why the 75 is an abbreviation behind the ABG. And in combination with the US codes, this ABG 75 gives us the building code of the federal state. For example, here we have Rhineland-Palatinate highlighted. I chose Rhineland-Palatinate. Apparently there is a lot of building construction and a lot of bases in Rhineland-Palatinate. There are also quite some in Bavaria and at Baden-Württemberg, but let's focus today just on Rhineland-Palatinate standards and the connection to UFC, IBC, and NFPA. Just in short, I know that quite some of you will use these slides and put it in your drawer or put in the shelf behind you. And I'd like to have you at least some definitions and explanations of all the abbreviations we're using here. So we can keep it short on the terms and definitions slide. I feel that most of you should know about the topmost items I've listed. Let's see on the bottom we have the LBAO, which is the abbreviation for the public building code in the federal state of Rhineland-Palatinate, and this is public law. You have to follow the public law and all the standards that are referenced in this public law. And there's one other standard, the VVTB. It's more like it's technical construction or building regulations that is used as explanation or for detailing the public law, the building code, the LBAO, in quite all details the building code covers. It's not only fire protection. Fire protection is quite a reasonable part of that, but if for example, the building code in Rhineland-Palatinate has about 80 pages, and the VVTB, the technical building regulations, has about we have about 400 pages in explanation and detailing. And I'd like to encourage you, don't be afraid of this huge pack of paper. There's so much very, very interesting information, helpful information in there. And a PDF is so easy to be searched through with the keywords you find in the building code. So don't be afraid of that. Use it. What's different to the US approach, you have a lot of workplace guidelines implemented in the NFPA 101 and connected standards. These are in Germany not part of the building law. So if you have authorities having jurisdiction checking the building application or permits, they will not check the workplace guidelines. this is something that is quite different from the US approach. So I'd like to mark this up or keep it in mind that the workplace guidelines, they are called ASR in Germany. They are not considered building law, but in fact, they're if you're planning US designs, US projects in Germany, you have to incorporate them. It's a lot easier and helpful, and it makes buildings safer and better. Next, that's it. I'm when doing other seminars or working at the university, I'm always asked by attendees who are the authorities, who is able to approve my questions to design, to a building code, to all that is connected with my project. And that's why I brought up this slide, just to give you an overview, just only for Rhineland-Palatinate. It's different at Baden-Württemberg for the German authorities. It's different for Bavaria, but the intent and the classification of the German authorities, that is quite similar. So what do we have? For the US forces, we have, of course, USA's Air Force, the military authority that is at base. We have, if you have medical projects, medical funded projects, you have the JCA coming over to Germany, checking whether the hospital you've designed and built applies to NFPA. And you have, of course, all over the bases, the US Fire Department, who are only advisory, not AHJ. They give their advice to the designs. They attend the charrettes. They're a particular, very precious part of the project, and it's always important to see how the local fire department works. You can develop all the design ideas and design your projects to code, but in the end, it's the fire department who's responder to an emergency on site. So I encourage you always talk to the fire department and take their advice seriously. For the German side, we have quite some national players here. We have the ABB, who's the Department for Federal Construction at Rhineland-Palatinate. They're permitting. They are the top level AHJ, to say it that way. And just below that, we have LBB and SGD, who are on one hand the executing and in parts permitting AHJs. It's difficult to understand. Sometimes the SGD supports the LBB, and by doing so, there's a quality assurance. There's a quality check and a code check inside of the authority having jurisdiction here. It's I think that's the easiest and shortest way to bring it up. The German building authorities at the cities, for example, the German building authority of Kaiserslautern will not be part of the ABG UFC project as a permitting authority. They are limited to civil projects only. And the German fire department is only supporting the project and advising the project if they're responding because there's no US fire department at base. So that's the authorities we're dealing with here in Germany in US projects. What else? There are quite some German and US codes and standards that I'd like you to keep in mind. We have always on top the guideline that tells you as a designer how to arrange US and host nation codes and which codes to use. That's for the German side is the RL-Bau, and for the US side it's the UFC, you apparently know. Then we have in Germany quite some standards on buildings, on special buildings like assembly, like mercantile buildings. From the US approach, all of these buildings and occupancy types are within the IBC and NFPA standards, and from the German, from the host nation approach, these are separate to the building code. So if you'd like to build up, say, a book on German design, on fire protection, you have to put in the building code of the federal state you're working in and all the special additional building standards on mercantile, garage, parking, industrial buildings, factory design, and so on. All of the occupancies that you know from NFPA chapters 11 to 42, these are separate documents in Germany. So look out for that. And baseline for definitions, for fire resistance ratings for materials. In Germany, we have the DIN 4102 and the DIN EN 13501, and that's the equivalent to the ASTME 119 or 84, and so on. So you see, it's from code-wise, there are a lot of parallels, a little bit different, but everything is arranged in a way that we as architects and engineers can work with it. So now that we're on the same page, let's start with the question why we're, in fact, why are we all, why do we have to align codes anyway? Before we're coming to the item and the core item of our today's meeting, I'd like to talk about the responsibilities and the meaning of fire protection from the US and from the German approach. And you will see that there's so much that we share from our approach, and there's not so much that is different. For example, I put up here the IBC from section A. So you see these are the safety objectives as baseline, as explanatory guideline to tell you what all the sections, the chapters, all the fire protection requirements, what they should bring up, which intent they should meet. And This is recurring. We have a reasonable level of safety, protection of health, general welfare, protection of property. We have protection from fire and explosion, from conditions hazardous to life. And following this, NFPA 1 tells you nearly the same intents. So it's already good to know that IBC and NFPA are aiming for the same safety objectives. Now, if we switch to Germany, we see that there are also the same safety objectives addressed in the building code. A building has to be arranged, built, and changed and maintained in a way that fires and smoke can't spread, that you are able to rescue people, and that you're able to perform firefighting. So seeing this, you also see that the goals are the same to achieve, but the way getting there, the design approach, how to achieve a safe design, how to achieve personal safety, building safety, public welfare, that's different. And that's where we go now. So the basis for the code alignment, on the one hand, is the host nation codes. It is the NATO codes, and from the US approach, it is to follow the UFC. And UFC gives us the advice to ensure compliance with the most stringent code as applicable. And these are only the US codes. These are so far the NATO agreements, and we have HNFA, the host nation codes. So that is our bunch of codes and standards and guidelines we have to pick from and build up a safe design. It's nearly the same, it's exactly the same what UFC 3-601 tells us. And 3-601 is also more specific how to follow, how to arrange the quality and identify the most stringent code. If there are any code issues that we as designers have questions regarding conflicts of codes and which code to choose, if there's a more stringent or just a different approach, we have to consult the AHJ. And that means we have to consult both the US and the German AHJ, depending on which phase in the project we are. Until 15% design, we are apparently working only with the US AHJs. After that, we're depending on project size and type, where the host nation AHJs like LBB or ABB come in. We also have to hear their advice towards the code alignment. So what's the German view on that? Now we had the US view on that. The German view on that is that also the most stringent code has to be followed. And the point where it's more precise here is that first, the host nation codes have to be fulfilled which also tells you that is a thing that is also told us by the UFC. And the phrasing of the German code, the ABG that governs us, like UFC is governing us in the US projects here, is very, very clear. You have to fulfill host nation code, and then on top you'll have to incorporate all the US principles, codes, and standards that are more stringent, more restrictive than the German code approach. Said that, this is the baseline, the intent, and the way to build together a code alignment. It's both UFC and ABG. They're both luckily giving us the same start to building up a code alignment, and giving us some guidance how to design a US building in Germany. So now we're at the main topic, code alignment. Let's begin with the question, where do we start actually with code alignment? I mean, there's so many codes. There's UFC. We have this US project in Germany. We have UFC as a code. We have IBC and NFPA referenced in the UFC. And then we have governing all of this, the NATO codes with the ABG. And we have the German host nation codes, building code, VVTB, all the special occupancies that are separate in Germany. And all of this we have to bring down to a system which we are apparently able to be working with. If you organize the codes according to UFC and ABG, you'll see that we all start with a US project. There's a user, we have occupants that like to have a new building, or who come up with a need for a building refurbishment, a change in occupancy, or something like that. This drops down to the ABG, the NATO guideline, the NATO law in this point, and the NATO guidelines are specified on one hand in the UFC, on the other hand, German side, in RL-Bau. And actually, UFC and RL-Bau, that's where the aligned design, the code alignment starts. Because here in these codes and standards, the sorting of the actual US and German standards happen. So we learned before that there are many interests in a project. We have budgets, users, authorities, military codes, civil codes, US codes, German codes. There's a lot to sort out, and this is the way we do it. And we apparently feel that we meet the intent of both RL-Bau and UFC. So first we have the German building codes and standards. We have the LBO, VVTB, and the special occupancies. Directly congruent to the LBO is the IBC 2015. So if you're putting together an aligned design, you will see always to check LBO versus IBC. The NFPA focuses on, in chapters 11 to 42, on all the special occupancies and special requirements to each occupancy. And that's where we in Germany are with the VVTB and the special occupancies guidelines, standards. And that's the second package we're going to review. Having said this, let's see some examples on how to approach actually a building in Germany. So we learned that first we need to review the German side, and on the next step we'll check if there's any more stringent from the US side coming up. But there are some hiccups. There are some difficulties you might stop over. For example, the building area in Germany is always the gross area. In when reviewing US projects, you'll have to check if there's a gross area you review per occupancy, or there's a net area you review. In Germany, it's always the gross area. Same goes for the building height. The building height in Germany is determined from the surrounding ground to the topmost floor where you have an occupancy. If you have a mechanical penthouse above, that's not taken into account to the topmost floor. It's from the surrounding ground to the bottom, the floor slab of the topmost floor. It's not to the roof. And another step is that the occupancy and incidental occupancies, they are split up in special occupancy regulations. They're not in the actual regulation you're working at. They're not in the building code, for example, as they are in the IBC or in the NFPA. From the US approach, you will see you have to. Oh no, we're still at the German approach. After having the design for the building, the construction, and the occupancy, you'll have an occupant load calculation only for assemblies and mercantile places. We're not in Germany. We don't have any guidelines in building law for calculating occupant loads in other occupancies like business or schools or anything like that. We have the workplace guidelines, which give hints, but it's not as detailed as it is in NFPA 101. Having defined the occupancy, the occupant load, we're talking about travel distance. And the travel distance is also, beside that it's most of the time 35 meters in Germany and far shorter than the US approach, the travel distance is measured differently as it is on the US approach. We are measuring travel distance in a straight line and without furniture. So there's no measuring in a natural path. It's a straight line. that somehow equals that there's only a travel distance to exit of 35 meters in Germany. And now, having the travel distance, we're going through all the special fire protection equipment, organizational fire safety, and fire department operations, and that's pretty much the same as it is in the US. But please keep in mind, if you're looking at fire department operations, the fire departments in Germany are used to use aerial apparatus and ladders as a second means of egress, which is for at least some lower or smaller buildings equivalent to having tube stairs in a building. But that is a very different approach from a German point of view to the US compared, since there's a very tight net of public and voluntary fire brigades, fire departments in Germany. We have a response time in everywhere in Germany of a maximum of 10 minutes when the fire department or the fire brigade, the voluntary fire brigade, has to be on site at the emergency. The US approach for military projects starts with analyzing what the funding of the project is. You have a different approach for a medical or non-medical project, but you choose your main occupancy. You check if there's additional regulations for the military branch you're working with, and then you go to IBC, checking for the criteria, main occupancy, building area height, and so on. But keep in mind, the building height and the building area compared to the German approach are different. You have to incorporate that. And the cut to working with between IBC and NFPA comes when defining the occupancy and the occupancy separation. The fire resistance rating of occupancies in medical funded projects are done in the NFPA 101. For non-medical funded projects, we're up with IBC. But there are still some similarities. NFPA 101, chapters 11 to 45. That's there are a lot more occupancies defined in NFPA than we have special building codes and guidelines for occupancies in Germany. But that's always a good place to start and to see where you can align codes with the occupancies. The means of egress that some of you might think that 35 meters of travel distance to exit is the most stringent requirement always, ever. And it's not actually. The most stringent requirement most of the time is the common path length that is defined by the US codes, because that is a part that we apparently do not know in Germany. We don't measure common path length, but I feel, and I think that's a very critical and very good way to think about means of egress and make the path to exit more safe. Having reviewed the German and the US approach, so we have to make sure in the code alignment that the host nation requirements are the minimum requirements, and everything that comes from the US are additional requirements on top. When preparing, for example, the life safety and fire protection drawings, you need to show both ways to address the means of egress, because they're limited comparable. You need to show the system of separations. Apparently, in showing the equivalent German fire ratings, because when building in Germany, when preparing a design for Germany, you might want to build with German fire protection products in the end. And these fire protection products, we'll see that later, they are referenced to German or European building codes and building law. So having a code alignment drawing that shows the equivalency of separations, walls, ceilings, doors, this is very critical to the building phase of a US project in Germany. Otherwise, it's if you only show the US ratings and the US requirements, you will run into trouble when looking for building projects. You will find products that are tested according to ASTM or according to UL, FM, whatever. But it's far more easier to use European products with an equivalent safety or an equivalent fire rating. So all this information joined in one document set, code alignment. You have narrative, you have drawings, you have occupant calculation, and you have the code compliance summary sheet, which is like an incredibly huge table addressing and showing both code approaches with the codes and a final recommendation which code to follow, and having this CCSS in the end. That's the document that shows you actually which is the stringent code, the most stringent code, which standard governs this design, this building. So look out for the CCSS. No matter if you're AHJ, if you're a consultant on the US side, consultant on the German side, or if you're up to build this design for the occupant at base. This table tells you which design has to be executed in the end. And now, how do we build such an aligned design? How do we follow up this? I've put together just 4 or 5 typical products which you'll be using in all of the projects. We have doors, dampers, drywall construction, and please keep in mind, the code alignment is not product alignment. We're only talking code alignment in codes. We're not aligning the German fire door to the US fire door or vice versa. It's always code alignment. This is why it's so important to make sure that you have, in the end of your design process, an aligned design showing the equivalencies, having tables that tell you which way to follow. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to build your project. In order to do so, if there's a question, if a product is suitable or not, you will have to ask the AAJ. And from fire protection standpoint, there are also the designated fire protection engineer who wrote the narrative and prepared the SS. And of course, from the US side, the QFPE, the qualified fire protection engineer, who reviews the design and makes sure that all of the US requirements are met. So these group, AHJ, DFPE, QFPE, they are helping you as a construction company implementing the US design in a German environment. Examples. Masonry concrete. Now this is an easy one. You have generic requirements defined in the DIN, and you have exact requirements to a material thickness, covering of reinforcement, and so on. And the same items are covered by the US norms, the US codes. So this is directly comparable. This is, you can you have an excellent chance to find a way to build, for example, 2-hour rated wall with German building materials like this. This is an easy one. But what of drywall construction? Drywall construction is a little bit more complicated, but still, in the end, it works out pretty good. We have also the products and the resistance ratings defined by DIN. Also, the thickness of the plates, the stud spacing, lining where you have penetrations, the insulation if there's anything like that required in the drywall construction, and the same things are in the US approach. I recommend you strongly to look into the GA 600 as the most current edition, where you can see a lot of generic designs. It looks like this, where you have a small text on how the board and the studs and the screws should be apparently work out. You have the the design noted and a small description. And if you look at these US design notes and generic designs, jumping to the drywall construction, how it is referenced in the German norms, you see this is very, very similar. So you can easily compare drywall construction from a US approach to the German approach and the norms. That's nearly as easy as it is for masonry and concrete. But now we come to the nasty things. If you have fire protection products like fire smoke doors, gates, hatches, you have product approvals, which are most time host nation approvals, see German or European approvals, and they're not comparable at all with the US design approval. They're tested differently, and they have different temperatures in testing. And the same goes for fire and smoke dampers. You can find a 1.5 hour fire damper tested by UL, but it's not the same as a 90-minute host nation German fire and smoke damper. They're different in design, they're different in testing. So this is the reason why the aligned design should always show the host nation fire protection requirements, the fire ratings, So you're able to choose an appropriate product, door or fire damper, to build it, the fire damper with the correct fire resistance rating and the correct wall. A little bit easier, it is at the penetration stopping. If you're sealing penetrations with mortar, this is an easy one because it's directly comparable, similar to the masonry construction. When doing pipe, cable and pipe penetrations with ceilings according to approvals, it's the same, nearly the same problem as we have with doors and fire dampers. The approvals are not directly comparable. There are at least some manufacturers, like I have, for example, a Flamro, but there's also Zimmermann, who they have both their products tested according to European norms and as well to US norms, like or tested by UL, for example. We have FM here. I know there are some products tested by UL from Zimmermann, for example. So that is a way to get along if you're able to find products that are tested from both parties, the European and the US. Now, having built the project, there's a German specialty that comes in, the requirement of the declaration of conformity to prove that the work that has been conducted meets the narrative and meets the fire protection drawings, so that the actual building is in line with the permit for the building. This needs to be documented, and normally is done by the German FPE. I've listed quite some items that need to be incorporated in such an approval. There are quite some certificates and testing and documentation and approvals for all the products, fire protection products that they used. So please keep this as a short reminder what might be necessary for one of these final documentations of the FPE. Make sure that you have in the end the certificate of the structural proving engineer that the building is safe. That is a central requirement for here. And also make sure that your drywall construction also meets the US requirement, or you have agreed with the client that the German design of the drywall construction shall be executed. Because the temperature curves that have here, the temperature curves, the German, the European temperature curve for testing materials and defining fire resistance ratings, and this is the temperature curve for US designs. You see the fire burns very similar, but the testing methods, actually to build the test, that is different. For example, we don't used to have the hose stream test in the end of the testing in Germany. I know that there's a lot, all the tests in the US use hose stream tests after combustion, and we do not have this in Germany. That might, for example, end in such things that glazing in fire doors is far larger in Germany than it is in US products. So please keep this in mind, that there's there are quite some differences in testing. And if you like to be on the safe side, make sure that part of the code alignment is a table that shows you equivalencies, both the US equivalencies and the host nation equivalencies. That is, I've learned that this is a good approach to make sure that the design is buildable. And still, looking at time, we're quite late. Sorry for that. I just have some hints for the final testing of fire products, of doors, fire and smoke dampers, and penetration ceilings when you're finishing up your building site. Just as a hint from me to you, if you haven't known about this, maybe it helps to make the building in the end a little bit better and safer. So I've talked about more than 50 minutes. Having heard not any questions, is there a question from you?
I just put in the chat that if you have questions, please just raise your hand and then we'll call on you.
Oh my goodness.
Timo,
everyone fell asleep.
No.
Talked too long. It was too boring. I'm so sorry.
I have a question. Can you give an example of where you simply cannot align the two codes, the German and the US, and you simply have to go in with redundant system, or has there been a case where you just simply couldn't get them to match?
There's a very easy example. In the German host nation approach is putting smoke detection nearly everywhere. If you have not just a standard building, but some special occupancy, you can bet on it that there's smoke detection. And we use smoke detection for early detection of fire. And since the maintenance intervals in Germany are longer than the maintenance intervals and the maintenance procedures from the US point of view, this always leads to a conflict. Since because the US view is we put in sprinkler, we sprinkle the building and limit fire, which is also coming from the fact that the net of fire departments and the response time, I learned that once in the US, is longer. So you need to have a system in place that fights fire up from the beginning. And that's a different thinking, a different approach, which you can hardly align. There are some projects where we could convince the authorities, the German authorities, to drop full smoke detection for a building because we're having full sprinkler protection because of the USC requirement. But it's only a handful of projects where the German authorities accept that. That's always a point of discussion.
Thank you. Interesting example.
Hey, Charisse, I have another question. A couple people have asked, they can't find the slides on the website.
Okay. In the chat, it was posted. I'll post it again. I see there's a couple more people with questions, by the way.
Scott? Yeah,
I
Scott.
will post the link to the slides again in the chat.
Thanks. And Scott Turgan, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. And first of all, thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting, and it's good to finally see some kind of comparison between the two. I don't work in this topic in much detail, but there's some overlap. And so my question will be kind of more basic. Often we are in Germany or throughout Europe, interested in moving into a new building somewhere. So if there was a building that was, probably constructed to the German design standards, and then we're considering then a U.S. occupancy, what are some of the major things we can expect that we would need to do to that building to bring it up to U.S. standards as well?
Yeah, good question. You probably might not worry about the construction or the construction type. Typically, buildings in German are either masonry construction or reinforced concrete. So you end up most of the time in type 1 or type 2 construction per IBC. So that leaves you to have a large fire area in the building. And things you might consider are that typically we don't have too many extinguishing systems in buildings. So if you're using a German building for US occupancy, you probably have to put in a sprinkler system.
Okay.
One word to sprinkler systems. Don't let anybody tell you, especially the German AHJs, that it's a base requirement to build sprinkler systems to German or European standards. All the national codes, all the national laws tell you that if you put in a sprinkler system, the sprinkler system has to be safe and appropriate to use. It doesn't tell you you're only allowed to use German or European standards. I know a lot of non-US military projects in Germany, especially storage and storage handling, that are protected by FM sprinkler systems or NFPA 13 sprinkler systems.
Okay, thank you. I find that those couple points interesting. And then maybe just a further thought. So if the reason for sprinkler systems is, and the heavy reliance on the US codes is based upon longer response times, that makes sense. But interesting that if we can assure having these short response times here in Germany, interesting that we're still holding that requirement. You've been in this business a long time. Has there ever been discussion to trying to fight that and say, this, the same methodology is not needed since we have this 10-minute response time? Has there been any work on that to try to simplify the requirements from the US side?
If you're looking at the special occupancies or the different occupancy standards in Germany, you can see that some of them are apparently wrote by Germans all the way through. But there's one, I just like to pull up this example. It's the special occupancy standard for parking garages. And this one is based on the US design approach, because back then, 60 years ago, we didn't have so many car parking in Germany, and the current standard for car parks is works with sprinkler systems all the way through, and with heat and smoke exhaust, and is most of the time only steel construction. That is why you can see that that the US approach also works in Germany, because we have implemented the US approach on parking garages in German parking garage way back. So nobody can tell you that US fire and life safety doesn't work in Germany too.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. We've got 3 more questions, about 10 minutes. So I'm going to call next on Drew Raw. Drew?
Yeah, hi, Cherise. Thank you. Timo, firstly, I just want to congratulate you. Might not be your first language, but your grasp of the English language is excellent. Well done.
Thank you very much.
So apologies, I had to drop off to take a call during the presentation. So if this has been covered, I apologize. With regards to you mentioned that the codes similar to here in the UK, that the more onerous of the 2 national standards will apply, i.e. you need to demonstrate that if it exceeds the other, that it carries weight. Who acts as the final regulator in Germany for that assurance of compliance between the 2, that both sets of standards have been fulfilled? Is that a German host nation representative, or is it a combination with DOD? How does that work? Over.
The last one, we have a combination. We have for example, Rhineland-Palatinate. We have the ABB and the LBB who are approving the design, and they have to be in line with the US AHJ on the US side. So this could be the Air Force or USA's, and it's probably the same in UK when you're using BS 99, for example, and reference that to the US codes.
So who would, is there a single entity that signs and certifies that the design fulfills both sets of national criteria, and then ultimately that the construction has fulfilled the design, and therefore, you know, the A facility is clear for occupancy? Is there a single signature, and if so, who is that?
Yes, that's as I said, is the ABB and the LBB for Rhineland-Palatinate, who are checking if that's the declaration of conformity, which I referred in the end of my seminar.
Yeah.
They're checking if the fire protection engineer, the German fire protection engineer, has checked everything and signed it off. And they are going through the other requirements, like barriers, like workplace safety, like structural, and so on.
All right. So
they're signing that off.
Excellent. Thanks, Timo. So I think what I heard is that the host nation certifies compliance with input from an assurance on certain aspects from either USAID or.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And if you're having fire protection equipment, for example, in the building, like sprinkler systems or smoke detection, there are notified bodies, approving engineers, approving experts who check these as a third-party review and provide their approvals to the ABB, LBB, and the fire protection engineer in charge.
And they'd be referenced on the closure documentation. Timo, excellent. That's been really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Drew. And next I'll call on Jan Schmidt.
Thank you. Hi, Timo. My question is about what you told us, that there's no requirement which tells us to build a sprinkler system according to German or European guidelines or standards. And that's absolutely correct. Exactly what I tell all my clients. But as you really know, there's a letter from the highest building authority in Rhineland-Palatinate, and it tells us completely different things than that we have to follow German standards or European standards if we want to use the sprinkler system for compensation measures. And that's really a big issue. I think, it makes no sense, and there's no basis for this, but that's reality. And most of the time I can't convince my clients to use an NFPA 13 sprinkler system and for compensation measures, and to deviate from this letter from the highest building authority. And what are your experiences in this matter?
First, Jan, I fully agree, and very nice to hear. Haven't heard you a couple of years. See, it's always a problem if you have a VDS sprinkler system, for example, built in a US facility, because the purely VDS sprinkler system doesn't meet the NFPA 13 requirements. So in the end, you end up with having a mixed system, having parts of the NFPA 13 design in it and having the VDS design in it. And that ends up with a maintenance nightmare in my experience. So when discussing this maintenance nightmare and the different parts where the VDS and the NFPA standards have to be incorporated with both the German and the US client, that is most of the time where it get to the point that it's always that it might be more that it might be better to build just an NFPA sprinkler system. It doesn't work out all of the time, but most of the time you'll find a base with both parties to fix a path forward.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do, and it would be nice if we could have an exchange after the meeting in the next days or weeks. So that would be nice.
I'd be happy to,
because I'm very interested in this issue.
It's always a fight. It's always a fight. It's totally unnecessary.
Yeah, I see it exactly the same way you told us. Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Jan.
Thanks, Jan. So we're just about out of time, but let's squeeze. We've got one more patient question person here. Jesse Felter, would you go ahead and ask your question? We'll try to answer it expeditiously here.
Certainly. Timo, again, it's good to see you, and we appreciate your time. Would you briefly describe the differences in developing life safety drawings between the US and Germany?
Oh, the most obvious difference is that in Germany, all the life safety drawings are full color drawings up to A0 format, the European equivalent. We don't do small formats and split up. We like to have the really large view on the whole building, and we're not so into hatching and making fire and life safety drawings readable either if they're copied black and white or if they're in color. So we always tend to use the colored way more than the way in black and white with hatchings and lines. And I think that is the most different thing in life safety drawings. At least I know.
Okay, does that answer your question, Jesse?
It does directly. I know we're short on time, but my concern was along the lines of getting a building certified to be built in the US and the documents necessary for doing so appears slightly different in Germany, that what the information is provided in a life safety drawing early is not equivalent in a host nation, in my experience.
We have the ratings of the walls, the doors, egress is in the drawings. You have also occupancy loads in the drawings where you have assembly, for example. Not so much in business, but that's easily to incorporate. So all these fire protection features are pretty much the same if you're doing a US drawing or a German.
So Timo, Nadia Hula wrote in asking where can we find the CCSS? Timo,
Someone else?
Timo, you might have gotten muted. There.
No, I'm not muted.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the last thing you heard from me?
Okay, Nadia, did you get the answer to that question?
I did, yes.
Okay, I know I'm looking. Okay. Okay, good. I guess
it muted on me as well, Margaret. I didn't hear the response. Where can you find the CCSS?
Oh, the CCSS. That actually is a typical part of the U.S. host nation aligned fire life safety design. It's like an annex to the. It comes with the drawings because of the size most of the time.
Okay.
Great, thanks. So we are well out of time now, so I would like to wrap up for today, but I would point out that there's been Brian Gerdwagen had submitted a question maybe we can answer by email outside of this event. And so Timo, I just want to thank you so much for this presentation. You did, to me, just the right mix of providing a top-level overview and just enough technical input to really whet everybody's appetite and give us a great introduction to this important topic, and we can all research further. I want to say that, you mentioned you were maybe dry, but I will tell you that we had a large audience, and that audience all hung with us till the very end. I think people just had to drop off, just a few people at the top of the hour for meetings probably. So it shows the importance of this topic and the relevance, and the fact that you did just a marvelous presentation, and I appreciate so much your efforts today. And I think everybody earned their professional development credits, and be sure to seek those from Lindsay Edwards in the email that you all would have received in relation to this meeting. Charisse, I'm going to turn it over to you to any final remarks as the president.
No, thank you so much, Timo. This was an excellent technical presentation, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
So thank you very much. You've been a really great audience, and I mean, we're literally all in the same business, keeping people safe, and making the world a little bit better. So thanks again. Thanks for the contributions. Thanks for the inviting me. I'd be happy to speak to you and to discuss with you. And of course, Brian, I'll send you an email, or if you send me your question directly, you have my contact details. I'll get to you. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.